So, today I have Gregg Fraley. We've never actually talked.
N-
We've only communicated over the written word. So
That's true. So,
this is
hello,
different.
welcome. It's great to see your face, and even though we're not face to face having coffee or a beer, this is the next best thing. So, good to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you too. So I took your creativity course. That's kind of how I got to know you um, over LinkedIn. I took the course. I thought it was a great course. Would you like to talk a little bit about that and what you're doing in that space?
Yeah, I have offerings on the creativity area and also the innovation area, and so one tends to focus more on personal growth and self expression, and the other innovation tends to be business needs and values and creating value there. So the creativity thing that you were a participant in was called the Creative Flow Challenge, and I do one of those a month. It's an 18-day. Every single day there's a creative thing you have to do. I send out daily stimuluses in the form of an email, and then the agreement that you make as part of it is that you put a half an hour at least into your creative work projects every day. And so for 18 days, you build that habit and practice. And so it's all about, getting into a groove and getting into a creative flow. And so I'm helping people to get there.
So, what do you? One of the things that intrigued me, one of the articles you posted on LinkedIn was about how the U.S. is falling behind in innovation. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's a big topic. There's an annual measure done by Bloomberg, and they go out and they measure all this public data across 140 countries, I think. And they basically look at things like education and startups and trademarks and all sorts of measures related to innovation. And so I've been following that index for years. And, routinely the US was number one for many years in a row. And then about 3 or 4 years ago, we dropped off to like seventh or eighth. And this year, we dropped off to 13th. And I see that as a very bad signal. And there are reasons why, and I talk about that in my blog article and the one that I published on LinkedIn and so forth. But at the end of the day, the biggest reason for the drop off is investment in educating highly skilled people. So engineers, people who are highly skilled at chemistry or engineering or manufacturing or construction. So things that require a lot of education and skill to do are things that the USA is currently not really investing a lot of money in. And in fact, we're 43rd in that particular category. And that drags our overall ranking way down. We're still number one in a lot of things like patents and so forth. So it's not all bad, but I think it's a canary in the mine that we need to reinvest in STEM education mostly, to be honest. We need more highly skilled people.
Yeah, one of the things that always strikes me is that a lot of people come to the United States for education, especially for doctorates and that. And rather than offer them a place here, we promptly send them back home to innovate in their own
Hmm.
countries. Um, what's your thought on that? Is that obviously not
Well,
reflective of?
no, and I mean, we still have a very good educational system, and in fact, the Chinese and many European countries send their best and their brightest to learn here because we have the best offerings and I mean, schools like Stanford and MIT they lead the world in terms of sophisticated education. And the trend of sending them home with those skills is a new trend. That did not always used to be the case. Most of, or I would say many, of the most significant startups in Silicon Valley were started by guys just like that, or people just like that, who learned here, decided to stay here, went to Silicon Valley, started something up, and boom, next thing you know, it's $1 billion plus company. And that happened for many years. There's an interesting book if you want to read about how all the immigrants basically invented Silicon Valley or made it what it is today, by a guy named George Gilder, who was an advisor to Ronald Reagan. But Gilder wrote a book called Microcosm, which basically is a history of Silicon Valley, the early history. And it's a fascinating read. And, you know, story after story of entrepreneur who basically was an immigrant.
Yeah, it's interesting. What's your take on, you know, the current, I don't want to get too political, but what's your take on the current talk about people leaving Silicon Valley for other areas of the country?
To do startups other places.
Yeah, like I think Austin's become quite the tech center in a pretty quick fashion. Do you think that's a good thing, a bad thing, or what?
I think it's an okay thing. I think it's good for there to be more than one center for, you know, entrepreneurial hallelujah. You know, Silicon Valley is always going to be, I think, a force. But it's nice to see Austin doing well. It's nice to see Chicago doing pretty well. It's nice to see New York have its entries, and even it's really great to see rural areas and smaller cities also creating really interesting things and encouraging entrepreneurialism and innovation. So you're seeing it everywhere.
Yeah. Switching topics a little bit. What do you think, you know, from an innovation perspective? I mean, you've worked with a lot of companies in your time in innovation. Where do you see companies struggling? I mean, it seems like there's no shortage of ideas in companies, but they're just difficult to take it from an idea to an actual product. What are your thoughts on better ways to do that?
Many books have been written about that subject, and it's a complex thing. But let's start with the fact that people don't usually get motivated. When I say people in charge don't get motivated to invest in innovation until there's an emergency. So a lot of big companies are proactive in innovation, particularly companies in industries that are fast moving, like, you know, pharmaceuticals or some kinds of manufacturing. So they know they have to innovate, and so they put together innovation programs and they try to develop innovation culture and mindset. But other companies that are in more status quo industries aren't motivated until there's an emergency to do innovation. And that's the first problem. They wait until it's too long and too late to really invest and do the training and get the mindset and culture established and put in place a cycle of innovation projects in order to stay ahead of the curve. So they wait too long, and then they're in an emergency. They try and fail because they don't have the skill to do it.
Yeah. Do you think that's just are they just? What's the problem there? Because I've seen it in, and I won't name the company, but they make phones, and you know, I was with their product for a while, and they stopped innovating. It was about the time they were making $1 billion a week in profit, and an alternative platform was out, and I switched to that. And just because of innovation, they rather than innovate, they were, I would say, sandbagging a little bit. And do you think there's just so much pressure from the investors? Because, you know, once you get that cash cow going, nobody wants to upset the apple cart. And so you think it's just a matter of, you know, them feeling pressure. Like if we, you know, it's like when McDonald's, you know, changed their the French fries. They took the trans fats out. I mean, that took years because everybody was just panicked about, we can't mess up the French fry, right?
They were
And
mighty
you think it's
tasty
just
with that
fear?
lard. I'll tell you that, brother. They were mighty tasty.
Yeah, I had a
Yeah,
few,
yeah.
myself, and I agree. But do you think it's just fear? I mean, do you think it just comes down to they're afraid, like if we upset this, we're just getting too much pressure and we're making too much money, and they're kind of a victim of their own success. I mean, I've
Yeah,
seen that. You've seen that with like BlackBerry, for example. You saw it with Kodak. I mean, they invented the digital
yeah,
sensor, and, and they just tucked it away, and because their cash cow was
right.
film, right? So, is it just lack of courage? Do you think? Or
Yeah, I think that is definitely a big part of it. I mean, you have to think about the corporate mindset. What is the mission of a big company like Kodak or Motorola?
hmm
You know, their mission is to create a cash cow somehow. And when they get to that point where they've got one, they want to milk it for every dime possible. And the entire orientation of the organization from the top down is milking that cow. So when somebody says, "Hey, let's do an electronic camera that replaces film entirely," that's heresy. You get at a company like Kodak, you get taken out and put against a wall and shot for suggesting something that's that disruptive. I mean, I personally did work with Blockbuster before their demise. And, I was trying to lead them into, and Netflix had already arrived. So it wasn't like they didn't see that on the, horizon. It was there on the horizon to see anybody who looked. But they weren't talking about a new model for delivery. They were talking about pizza, right? And so,
yeah,
again,
that didn't
that's
work
milk
out
the
so well.
cow. It didn't. It didn't at all. So yeah, you've got to be
Hmm
proactive in innovation, and it's painful to make those kinds of changes. And I think the way for companies to instantiate innovation in their culture is to always have an innovation project going on, always on with some kind of project. Yeah, it can be incremental. That's okay because you can learn on incremental innovation. And you should also have projects that reach for the sky and could be the game changer. It could be the next thing in the industry. But it takes real vision to be a company that completely reinvents itself and is able to sort of hop on to the next wave of technology or whatever it is their industry is driving their industry.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think of any examples of a company that's actually been successful at that.
IBM to some degree. Leo, what's his name? I want to say
Yeah, yeah.
that I want to say Gerstner, but I know that's wrong. But a guy came into IBM in the early '90s and basically upset the apple cart completely. And he realized that they had to move away from hardware and into services in order to be successful. And he made that change, and he did it. Wish I could remember his name, but he did a great job. So that's one example.
Perhaps yeah, we'll have to Google that afterwards.
Apple, to some
So
degree,
what are the
has reinvented itself
yeah
at some level.
yeah and Microsoft also showed up as I think the top innovative company recently I saw. So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, there are companies that have done it.
So I'm all out of ammo.
Oh, in terms of questions? Well, I'll spout a little bit about innovation and things I've been thinking about lately. So there's a huge opportunity in innovation right now that is generational, and that's adoption of digital tech. And there's so many new digital technologies that are arriving month after month like a tsunami. And every company should be looking at how to integrate new digital technology into what they do. There are absolutely life-changing, industry disrupting, big changes that are going to happen in every single industry based on new digital tech. So if you're not doing digital tech projects right now, you're not innovating. So that's something that's one of the soapboxes I'm standing on right now is, look at your value chain. Look at everything you do from the moment one of your customers dreams about something or recognizes they have a need to the service, on the other end of that spectrum, after you've sold a customer. So websites, delivery, the product itself, the business model, the money making model, how you get paid, the consumer experience or the customer experience, all of that needs to be re-examined, thinking about, okay, how could we use AI here? How could we use blockchain there? How could we use NFTs? All these new things that are coming out that who would have dreamed of an NFT even a year ago? It's a wacky idea. Non-fungible.
Yeah, it's very overwhelming. I think that for me, at least in the IT area, just the number of technologies coming at us from all angles. It's the times where it's very overwhelming, and it's difficult to kind of keep your hands around everything. It's just getting worse.
So if you're a company and you feel that overwhelm, the solution is pick a pain spot that you have right now. Pick an area where you don't feel you're doing well. And then ask yourself, what is a simple digital project we could do in that one area to improve it? So be discreet and pick out a very simple, straightforward project, implement the technology, and then look for the next low-hanging fruit. And right now, there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. It's almost the overwhelming part for me is what project to do, not what project. So
Yeah, that's fair.
yeah, and the other soapbox I'll stand on as a consultant is education, and I don't mean broadly like in terms of national education and in STEM technology. I mean individual education of a given person or group of people on teams to basically teach them how to innovate and what their innovation mindset should be and how they should manage an innovation project. So getting into frameworks, getting into tools and techniques, getting into facilitation, getting into basically a broader base of knowledge in the team's minds about what's possible in terms of how to go about it. A lot of companies adopt a single framework like design thinking or lean as an approach, an overall approach.
Right.
And that's fine. That's great, as a matter of fact. But if they don't look at other frameworks and other tools, they're probably not going to get a competitive advantage from adopting lean or agile or whatever, design thinking.
Yeah, in the past, I've been in companies that have adopted Six Sigma, and then everyone had to do one project, and so we're hunting around trying to figure out, okay, what problem will fit this solution, and I always thought that was backwards. It should be like if it fits, it fits. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Rather than trying to hunt something down like that. So I very much support like having a toolbox of methodologies as opposed to just everything's Six Sigma and that's
Yeah,
so
exactly.
not to pick on Six
And
Sigma.
Six Sigma is an interesting example because it really isn't an innovation method, it's a quality method. And so,
Right.
can it impact innovation? Absolutely. And it's a very important thing to be a manufacturer of high quality. But it isn't going to invent anything for you. It's not going to help you discover consumer needs or jobs to be done,
Right.
according to Clay Christensen and that whole innovator's dilemma philosophy. So that's why you're right. Having a toolkit so you can roll your own. So you might adopt a lean mindset, but you might use agile project management. You might use the front end of design thinking in order to get more empathy with customers, but you might use the back end of Agile for project management. So that roll your own, I think, is a good way to go. That's where the competitive advantage is.
Yeah, absolutely. So any final thoughts for
Well,
today?
anybody who watches this should buy my book on Amazon. It's Jack's Notebook.
I did. I
Thank
bought
you.
it.
You're the one.
I bought it. I haven't, but I had, but I, I'm the one. Yeah, I'm the one. So yeah, I bought it. I haven't finished it yet, but yeah, I plan on doing that. So
So that would be my final thought: is buy my book or subscribe to one of my creative flow challenges if you want to boost your own individual creativity.
well, that's great. I really appreciate you coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and stick around afterwards. We'll have a quick chat.
Will do. Thank you, everyone.